Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special edition of the Santa Barbara City College Faculty Colloquium. In a few moments, Professor Peter Naylor, who's known Michael Shermer for some time, will be introducing Mr. Shermer, Dr. Shermer. But before that, I wanted to give a special thank you to a lot of people. As coordinator of the colloquium, my job is easy. I just drive the bus and crack a few jokes, at least I think they're jokes. But I wanted to just mention to you that this colloquium has been evolving for 35 years. I haven't been here that long. I think Peter has. Have you been here 35? Peter's been here 35 years. And what we've tried to do is exactly what's happening tonight. We're trying to bring the college to the community and the community to the college. And your presence here tonight is testimony to the success of where we are, but we'll be going forward. I especially want to thank the Associated Student Government for making some of their personnel available tonight. Jason is here, and I don't know if Nuri is here yet. Alex Madagian, who is there he is down there, who is a co-sponsor. His group is called the Santa Barbara City College Critical Thinking Project. I never thought I'd live to see the day when there'd be a critical thinking project, because I teach critical thinking here. So there are a lot of people who make this process work, and you're part of that. And I want to welcome you and thank you for doing that. Now, as you came in, you were given a little red ticket. There's no problem with seating, so you really don't need the red ticket. Because we only had that red ticket in case there was a crushing throng. But I think the emergency alerts scared some people away, unfortunately. In any case, you were also offered an index card with a golf pencil. And the purpose for that is to, if you want to ask Dr. Shermer a question after his 35, 40-minute presentation, please fill the card out and then hold it up, and one of the ushers will fetch it from you and give it to me, and I'll be sitting over there. That way you'll get your question. We also have questions that we pulled from the internet. So, thank you once again for coming, and without any further ado from me, I would like to introduce Professor Peter Naylor. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Add to what Mark said. This was started as a faculty colloquium to share ideas, but we definitely want people in the community to participate. So if you enjoy tonight, as I think you will, I hope you'll talk to your friends, and we'll keep trying to promote it in the community, because sharing ideas is how we all learn. Now, what I want to respond to is, why would we invite Michael Shermer to speak at City College? And there were two reasons. I read an interview, a full-page interview in the Wall Street Journal with Michael, in which he talked about what he does, and learned in that interview that instead of being a part-time resident, he's now a full-time resident, living up here on the Mesa. So I thought, okay, I want to get to know him, and I contacted him. We immediately had lunch, and I think struck it off. And I realized that he's the type, I've always said, in the roughly 40 years I've lived in Santa Barbara, what I like best about it is it attracts interesting people. And sometimes you don't know why they're interesting. And of course the worst thing is if you just pass by them often and you never get to know them and you don't realize how interesting they really are. So I wanted to introduce Michael to his community and the community to Michael. But the second reason is that Michael's quest is what we hope for all of our students at City College. Now, whatever I mean by that. I could talk about his resume. It's 29 pages long. I think if you're that desperate for entertainment, you can go to Skeptic magazine and you can Google it. You can read it on your own. He studied psychology as an undergraduate and biology. I mean, this is how we learn how we think, how we process information, how we store it, how we recall it, how we integrate it, and therefore, how we make mistakes. And then he went on to get a PhD in the history of science, which has led to, I think, some of his core ideas. At the moment, he's a presidential fellow at Chapman College and a contributing editor to Scientific American. Over the years, he's contributed over 180 articles. He's the founder, editor, and publisher of Skeptic magazine, and the executive director of the Skeptic Society. And of course, all of us know that skepticism is at the base of science, and it is not cynicism. It is that we are open to ideas, but we want to evaluate them, and particularly evaluate the evidence, and then change our mind where that's appropriate. He's written 16 books, 29 professional articles, more than 40 popular articles. But as I got to know him, we share a passion for scientific method. I think it's fair to say, and he'll be up here in a moment to contradict me, that we believe that the application of scientific method is the source of a great advance for humanity. The notion that we should clearly state theories, honestly assess them against the evidence, and accept that all knowledge is tentative is absolutely essential to our progress and also to our getting to know and trust each other. Because when we do that, then we can talk to each other, we can listen, we can appreciate different point of views, and we can grow. His last book was on that theme and was called The Moral Arc, and I strongly recommend that to you. I think, as you reflect on what I just said, you realize that today, we as teachers are challenged, and I think all of us as a nation are challenged because of the tribal loyalties and the suppression of dissent on all sides. The careful thinking, the open-mindedness, and the respect for the views of others is as important as it has ever been. So what Michael is going to do today is talk about his new book, Heavens on Earth. And so thank you, Michael, for your generosity of your time and for your vision. Welcome to your new home in Santa Barbara.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Let's see if the mic is turned on yet, if you guys in the AV, there we go. Well, thanks for coming out. I brought hopefully enough magazines for everybody on your way out. If there's any left, go ahead and grab them. This is what I do for my day job, which I have an office in the Pasadena area. Fortunately, most of what I can do could be done on a computer, so I can live in Santa Barbara and still have an office down there and go to the beach and edit articles. Santa Barbara, what a great place. I'm so happy to be here. So Skeptic is the quarterly publication of the Skeptic Society. We're a 501c3 nonprofit science education organization devoted to examining claims of the paranormal, pseudoscience, fringe groups, cults, claims of all kinds between good science, junk science, bad science, voodoo science, pathological science, non-science, and plain old nonsense. And unless you've been abducted by aliens or been on Mars, you know, there's a lot of it out there, nonsense, that is. Some people call us debunkers, but let's face it, there's a lot of bunk that needs debunking, and that's part of our job. But more interesting is tackling big, important questions from a scientific perspective, like our last issue is, could artificial superintelligence destroy us? AI, are our cars going to take over and not only drive for us, but kill us all? And will computers replace all workers, and there'll be massive unemployment and things like that? We did another one on advanced civilizations that lived tens of thousands of years before, say, the ancient Egyptians. These are theories that are kind of on the margins or fringes that we examine. So please do check that out. The magazine actually is still in print. We, like all magazines, have transformed into the digital platform, and you can get eSkeptic every Wednesday for free. Just go on skeptic.com. But all the bookstores carry it as well, and I still like physical books too. I like going into brick and mortar bookstores, and you know, I know it's cheaper and faster to just order them on Amazon, but I think books will never die. I think we'll always still have books. My publisher predicts that it'll at most be maybe 70-30 or 60-40 physical books versus digital and audio. So I'm always happy to have a book that comes out, which I can hold and say, yeah, I did that, a physical thing. You know, that's kind of nice. So Heavens on Earth is about the search for the afterlife, immortality, and utopias. People often ask me why I decided to write about you know, death and dying and the afterlife, and I said, well, I turned 63, so you know, cram me for the final, because you never know. This could be it, but really it's more of an extension of my previous books that I've written books on science and pseudoscience, science and religion, science and God, science and morality, really just from a scientific perspective, any of the big questions that we're interested in. So really the hard question from the very beginning is, if you start thinking about when people ask, where do you go after you die? Imagine being dead. You can't do it. Because to imagine anything, you have to be alive. So it's almost a meaningless question. It's like saying, well, where were you before you were born? I ask people this. When they ask me that, and they look at you like, what? I wasn't anywhere before I was born. Right. And you won't be anywhere after you, that's it, same thing. Well, but wait, and it's like, no. Because at some point, you can't imagine it. It's like, imagine being, well, you can sort of imagine being asleep because you have dreams, but imagine being under general anesthesia. You can't really imagine it. All you know is, it's just 10, 9, 8, boom, boom, lights out, and then you wake up however many hours later. There's no sense of time elapsed because under that conditions, there's nothing keeping track of the time. And fortunately, you hopefully woke up. And your memories are still there and so on, but death would be something like that. But you don't wake up. Now, I'll deal with, in a moment, near-death experiences, reincarnation, and psychological anomalous experiences that people have, which people claim to be evidence of the afterlife. But from a scientist's perspective, these are not watertight. But let's look at this question for a moment, because it's actually much deeper than you think. That it deals with the problem of identity. Who are you? Who am I? And so, because that gets to the question is, what is the soul? People imagine, in a dualistic sense, that something like the soul survives the body. Well, what is that? Well, it's a pattern of information that represents who you are. We know it can't be just your physical body, although there are Christian sects that believe that when you die, you go to heaven physically. You're physically resurrected, right out of the grave. To which I ask, well, you mean I'm up there with Jesus? Maybe not me, because I'm an atheist. But I was once a Christian. I went to Pepperdine University, and I was born again for 7 years. So I'm thinking, maybe I'm in still. If I'm wrong now, once saved, always saved. I'm told. I don't know. But if that's the case, and I'm up there with Jesus in my physical body, to which I ask these people, how old am I? What? How old are you? Yeah. I mean, am I, and they have an answer. This one Christian sect has an answer. You're 30. Yeah, okay, 30 was a good year. I mean, I was physically strong. My mind was still sharp. But wait a minute, I'm 63 now. So what happened to the 33 years of life experiences and memories? Are they gone? No, you get those too. Well, how would that work in a 30-year-old body? Where do you get all your memories? Yeah, but my memories now of when I was 30 are not the same as my memories of being 30 when I was 50, or my memories of being 30 when I was 40. Memories are changed. They get edited. They're like a wiki. They're constantly updated and changed. In any case, the things that I did, say, when I was in my 20s, that then at age 30 I look back and they meant this or that, they mean something rather different now. Like, oh, I should have married this person, I should have married that person, I should have gone to this college, I should have done that career, or I shouldn't have done that career, whatever. But you don't actually figure that out until, decades later, you go, oh, so, okay, it worked out, or it didn't work out. So, does that all go to heaven also? I mean, how does this work? And if it's your physical body, one of the selling points of a lot of the Christian sects is that when you go to heaven, you're made whole again. So, the blind shall see, the deaf shall hear, the crippled shall be whole again, your body is perfect. So I quote from my friend Julia Sweeney, the Saturday Night Live comedian, from her famous monologue, Letting Go of God, where she opens this monologue with a little story about the Mormon boys coming to her house in Hollywood, pitching their religion to her, and so she invites them in, it's like pitching a movie, okay, give me your best shot here. So they tell her this whole thing about, Jesus came to America and, all this crazy stuff, and when you die, you get your own planet, and the blind shall see, the deaf shall hear, and be made whole again. And she said, well, now I had uterine cancer, so I had my uterus taken out. Do I get my uterus back? Imagine these 18-year-old boys in their starched white shirts going, What? Like, a uterus? I don't know. Yeah, you get your uterus back. She goes, I don't want it back. I mean, what if you had a nose job and you liked it? Do I have to get my own nose back? You know, okay, so maybe it's not your physical body. In any case, if it was, how would that continue without aging? You know, and so, well, God would fix it so you're not aging anymore. Well, then that wouldn't be me anymore. I mean, part of being human is aging and all the other stuff that goes with. Okay, so you'd have to be resurrected and somehow reconfigured in a way that you don't get cancer and Alzheimer's and all the other stuff. And so, you know, that whole scenario is wrought with problems. Now, we'll return to that in a moment when I talk about scientific ideas about immortality. That is like uploading your mind or being chronically frozen and these sorts of things. But then, so let's say it's just your soul. Okay, so now we're back to the who you are problem, because we know, for example, that almost all of the cells in your body are recycled about every 7 to 10 years. So you are not the physical person you were a decade ago. Your whole physical being has been reprocessed. New atoms, molecules, cells, and so on. None of what you are sitting there now was there 10 years ago. And yet there's a continuity of self, that you still feel like you. So it's not the stuff, it's not the matter, it's the pattern, it's the information that you are. So this is the problem of identity in philosophy, famous Theseus' ship. So Theseus was this great warrior that defeated I forget which bad god he defeated, anyway, Poseidon maybe, I don't know. Anyway, and so he returns home a hero in his ship, and they preserve the ship in the museum as this great monument to his heroism. And but over the decades, the ship kind of rots, and they replace the wood. And at some point, there's none of the wood left in Theseus' ship, and yet they still call it the ship because it's not the wood; it's the pattern. It's what it represents. My analogy is, my first car was a '66 Mustang, which I had for almost 20 years, and by the time I sold it and made a nice profit as a classic ’66 Mustang, there was very little in the car left that was there when I bought it, because, you know, when you're in your teens and 20s, you do things to cars that you don't do it now, hopefully. And anyway, so, but still, it's still a classic Mustang because it's what it looks like. It's the pattern, not the stuff, okay? So it's a little bit of like that. Well, okay, it's not your physical, it doesn't matter what the physical thing is that gets resurrected or whatever, it's just the pattern. So you are your information. So we need to preserve that, so that would be the soul. But hang on now, what are we talking about here? So to shift now to the second part of the book where I talk about scientific attempts to do this. And I kind of march through the kind of more mundane things, like people that are interested in radical life extension begin with just kind of regular life extension, like things you could do just to stay healthy. You know, get your vaccinations when you're young. You know, don't smoke, don't drink too much. All things in moderation. Don't jump out of airplanes with risky parachutes. You know, don't do crazy stuff like that. Have family and friends in a tight social community. These are the kinds of things. You know, diet. I'm not quite sure on the diet stuff. We've done a lot of issues of Skeptic on diet, because this is one of the most difficult problems to get at from a scientific perspective. What should I eat? You know, so the old food pyramid that we all, us baby boomers, grew up with, apparently is out the window. You know, now meat is back in. It's okay. Animal fat is good. Whole milk, whole yogurt. Don't eat that non-fat yogurt. Eat the rich, deep, you know, good stuff. Okay. But then I talk to my vegan friends. They go, no, that's all washed up. Here's some, you know, studies over here, studies over there. I swear, when I walk into Starbucks, I'm not sure if I should get the oatmeal or the egg sandwich. So I just get them both and then go for a longer bike ride. Anyway, you know, I mean, if you think about it, we're about to colonize Mars, and we don't even know what food to take. Okay, so, but moderately speaking, moderation on these sorts of things. We know leads to, but all this is doing, and I also debunked the myth in the book that people live twice as long today as they used to. This is not true. People centuries ago lived in their 80s and 90s and so on, just not very many of them. And because when you see these, you know, average lifespan was 40 years, now it's doubled 80 years, something like that. But these are really deceptive. And because of childhood deaths before age 5, for example, was so high in the Middle Ages and the early modern period, that pulled the whole average way down. If you made it to 5, you had a good chance of making it to 10. If you make it to 10, very likely to make it to 20. If you make it to 20, you're going to make it to 40. If you make it to 40, you have a good shot of making it to 60, and so on. You have to factor all that in. All modern medicine and technology, public health, vaccinations, all those things have done is just allow more and more of us to get up to the upper ceiling, which is about 120 years. And no one's ever going to make it past that. It's just not going to happen without radical restructuring of cellular physiology and genetics. There are people working on this. Calico is a company owned by Alphabet/Google. And Larry Page, one of the co-founders of Google, is very interested in this subject. They want to defeat aging. They treat it as an engineering problem, which is great. I think this is good that someone with that much money to dive into solving these problems, But when they say, Shermer, don't you want to live to be 500 or 1,000? I go, look, just get me to 80 without cancer. Give me to 90 without Alzheimer's. Give me to 100 without being senile. I don't even know who I am. Just solve specific problems along the way. Don't worry about, the outcome, and we're going to live 200. What are we going to do about overpopulation? Don't worry about that. Just solve these specific problems along the way. And that would be miraculous enough. And so anyway, so from the radical life extensionists, the problem is this, is that we have what's called a Hayflick limit on the number of times your cells can divide. This is, for most cells, about 50 or 60 times, and then the cells just quit dividing. And it's related to these little things on the tips of your chromosomes called telomeres. And there's a lot of research now on how to keep your telomeres strong and not too brittle. And so when your cells divide, they can divide more times than fewer times, so you live a little bit longer. And the things you can do are, not exactly shocking things like sleep 8 hours a night, exercise, cardiovascular exercise, moderate, good, healthy meal, whole foods, this kind of stuff we already knew anyway. Beyond that, maybe there's this telomerase stuff you could take in supplements. There's companies that'll sell you this stuff. No evidence that any of this stuff really works. Low-calorie diets. There was some evidence that this makes double lifespans, because it did in mice. This has never been tested or proven in primates yet. But we're talking really radical calorie reduction, where you're just hungry all the time. And you get to live an extra 10 years in that state. Oh boy. Instead of, like a guy my size, maybe 2,500 to 3,000 calories is what I need every day. And they're talking about lopping that in half. So, basically you get the oatmeal at Starbucks and then nothing until, a salad at night. It's not that, I think, not that healthy. But short of that, you've got to reprogram the entire genome, and we're not close to doing anything like that yet. So then the second step, so then have yourself cryonically frozen. So this is the idea of cryonics, where you're put in liquid, this liquid nitrogen, and you're just frozen. You're at a minus 160 degrees, okay? So you're just a block of ice. Now, you know what happens when you defrost frozen strawberries, right? It's just mush. Okay, this is not good for brains. So now they've improved the technology where they infuse your body and hopefully your brain with this antifreeze, this cryoprotectant agent that's used by people that work in like organ transplants and low temperature medical technologies, and that works pretty well. Like with embryos, you can freeze them, and for IVF you can bring them back and they work. But embryos are really, really tiny. Brains are really massive, and getting the cryoprotectant agent in there, suffused into every cell, is extremely difficult. Now this has been done on rabbits, but their brains are pretty small, and even though I observed one of these technology surgeries done, experiments, at this company I write about in the book, where they take the brain out, they slice it up and then scan it in an electron microscope, and the synaptic connections are all still intact, they say. You can look at it and see the little synapses. So the idea is that memories are stored in these synapses statically. This is the theory, static storage of memories. And the theory behind this is based on the idea, for example, in heart transplants, they lower the body temperature way down into the 40s, just above freezing. So your brain is not working. It's shut down. And then when they warm you back up and your brain comes back online, your memories return, hopefully. and so the fact that they do tells us that the memories are stored statically. This is the theory. So now I'm watching this going, wait, you just took the brain out of this animal and you cut it up. How is this going to bring it back to life? Oh, it's not, it's dead. I'm like, oh, okay. So what is this good for? Well, okay, scan this is called the connectome. The connectome is the analog to the genome. So your connectome is all your memories, this is the theory, and then we just uploaded it into a computer. Now, I'll come back to that in just a moment. I want to finish on the cryonics thing. So let's say that they somehow do get the cryoprotected antifreeze into your brain. So now, you got to remember, this is a form of burial as far as the government is concerned. As far as the state is concerned, you cannot just go to the cryonics place like Alcor in Phoenix. Phoenix, it's in the desert. This is not the best place to be frozen in case, the company runs out of money and can't pay its electric bill. Okay, but that aside, you're frozen on the worst day of your life. This is the day you died. Okay, so already this is not an auspicious start to immortality. Still, the theory is that when they wake you up, let's say 1,000 years from now, with the advancements of medical technology, we'll inject you with these nanobots and they'll run in there and fix all the broken cells and DNA and so on. This is the idea. Okay. Maybe. I mean, it's not impossible. I don't want to say anything's impossible, but very unlikely that anyone frozen today or probably in this century will ever be brought back. Still, as they point out, if you're cremated, you have 0 chance of coming back. At least the cryonics is not 0. Okay, all right, so it's 0.01, something pretty low. Now, it's not, to be fair to them, it's not that expensive. People say, oh, it's hundreds of thousands, like $200,000 for the whole body. You can get the head unit only for $80,000. I know, it sounds Frankensteinish, but the idea is we'll clone your body and just plop it on there somehow. That's the theory. Okay, so, but it's not that expensive really because you just buy a life insurance policy, which hopefully most of us have. I have a couple of life insurance policies. So you have, ones that I bought in my 20s, say there's a couple $100 a month premiums, and you just make the cryonics company the beneficiary rather than your offspring or whatever. That's the idea. But I don't think that's going to work. And it's not at all clear to me that when they wake it up, you'll still be there. I mean, the lights are on, you're online, boom, you're still you. Even worse would be the idea of, back to the previous experiment, we scan your connectome and upload it into the cloud. So this is like the movie Transcendent Man, Johnny Depp, or Transcendence, I think it was called. Johnny Depp plays a computer scientist, and a terrorist attacks him, and I think he gets polonium poisoning or something. I'm sure Putin had something to do with this. And so he's going to die like in a week, so he uploads his mind to the computer, his connectome, and turns it on. He's in the computer looking out through the little camera hole. Okay, I don't think this is what happens. Okay, so there's 2 cells, back to the who are you? There's the memory cell, mem cell, that's a copy of all your memories, which is already fraught with problems that we saw earlier. That is, you're not just a fixed snapshot, and that's your memories, that's it. That's who you are, because those are always changing. And so a copy of you would just be a copy of that, and then you turn it back on, and then it's having different life experiences. Is that still you? But let's say it is for a moment. But instead of doing it in the way I described, where we take your brain out, slice it up, scan every single synaptic connection, upload that huge digital file into a computer and turn it on, it's not at all clear that the other you, which is what's called the point of view self, POV self, this is the you looking out through your eyes, experiencing life right now, that's going to go with it into the cloud. So let's say, for example, instead of doing this with the crude slice up your brain technology, we instead slide you into an advanced, super sophisticated fMRI brain scanner. And we do it while you're still alive. And we slide you out, now we have your file, and we upload it and turn it on. What's up there when you're standing right here? Because you'll be going, no, that's not me. I'm right here, dude. So, you're not me, okay? It's just a copy of you. None of this really makes sense. This is what we have, here and now. Whether there's an afterlife or not doesn't really matter. because we live in this life, not the afterlife. So I call this Alvey's error. Alvey is Alvey Singer, Woody Allen's character in Annie Hall. And if you recall, near the beginning of the movie, he has a flashback to childhood where he refuses to do his homework. And his mom takes him to the psychiatrist, and Alvey, why won't you do your homework? He says, the universe is expanding. The universe is expanding. Yes, the universe is everything there is, and if it's expanding, then one day it's going to all blow up, so none of this matters. And his mother yells at him, what's the universe got to do with it? We live in Brooklyn. Brooklyn's not expanding. You got to do your homework. And that's right. We live in Brooklyn. We don't live in a universe that's going to die a heat death in trillions of years from now. Whether there's an afterlife or not, doesn't matter. We live in this life. We don't live in the hereafter. We live here. So how do you find meaning and purpose? Well, believe it or not, there's people that study this for a living. These are psychologists that, since the 1990s, have taken an active role in creating a new field of positive psychology. Before the 90s, most of psychology was about things that go bad. Mental illness, depression, suicide, violence, aggression, and so on. So it's like, wait, there are people that don't do any of these things, and they're happy, and how do they do that? And so anyway, but then more recently, there's been a move away from just the study of happiness to something else, purposefulness, meaningfulness. And it turns out there's a difference between being happy, leading a happy life, and leading a purposeful life. These are not the same thing. And so there's a paper I discussed by Roy Baumeister, a social psychologist, that looked at it from a huge database of just asking people, what do you do that makes you happy? What do you do that makes you feel fulfilled or purposeful? And they're not the same thing. So there's a couple elements here that I'll kind of review for you because I think it's revealing as to the kinds of things we could do. And it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's to say that there's a balance between doing both. So, for example, there's a difference between our wants and our needs. That is, satisfying one's desires may lead to greater happiness, but it appears to have little or nothing to do with meaning and purpose. So, for my example is, flying first class across the continent to New York. I'm happier when I'm flying first class than coach. And I'm in a slightly better mood when I get off and I deplane. But after that, then it's over. And I only do this if somebody else is paying, by the way, because 5 minutes after you're off, it's like, well, that was a waste of money. I could have just been in the back reading or sleeping. Okay. In other words, it's a short-term thing. You get the free drinks and you get whatever. But that doesn't make me feel any better. It's what I do when I get there that's going to determine whether I feel like I've done something purposeful or not. Okay, so and the second was time frames and action. So happiness is a present state of mind, whereas meaning transcends the here and now, reaching back to the past and forward to the future. So doing things that bring short-term pleasure is fine, but that's not going to lead you to have a more purposeful, meaningful life. You got to do something that has to do with who I've been and what I've done in my past and what I want to do in the future, involving long-term planning, especially things that have to do with other people. So 3, family and friends, that is. So for example, going out to dinner and drinks with friends, it brings me happiness, brings most people happiness, or else you wouldn't do it. But like spending time with family, it's not always necessarily, especially my family. No, just kidding. They're not watching it. No, we're not live streaming, don't get me wrong. No, I'm just kidding, not really. You know what I'm saying, right? I mean, you don't get to pick your family. And so, it's not always such a good thing to spend time with them. But let me give a different example. Say, caring for a parent. I've done this with 2 of my 4 parents. I had step-parents. When they're elderly, they're all gone now. So I was a caretaker for 2 of my 4 parents. For quite some time. For my mom, almost 10 years, she had brain tumors that she had taken. And then my stepdad, for about 2 years. And it was not fun. I was not happy doing this. There was no pleasure involved. It was physically exhausting, emotionally draining. Driving around to doctors and hospitals and care places. I hated it. But I felt better about myself for doing it. And I'm glad I did it. And, hopefully somebody will do that for me sometime. But that's kind of the idea. Long-term planning. It's not fun. It's challenging. Okay, so that's the 4th point, is doing something that's struggles and problems. That is, having challenges. My professors, are there golf courses and tennis courts? The metaphor for something to do that's challenging. You're not necessarily fun doing it, but having something that is challenging and difficult to do now, but it's better for long term. Whatever it is, something simple like working out. There's not a lot of pleasure in working out. If you're doing it right, it shouldn't be fun at all. And so, like, I'm a cyclist, so I go out on maybe a 2, like tomorrow morning. There's a 7 a.m. ride from the Dolphins, so I got to leave my house at about 6:40. It's going to be dark and cold, and it's not going to be fun. And we're out for 3 hours, and some of these guys, they go really hard. I'm just hanging on for dear life. And by the time I get home, I'm wiped out. This wasn't fun. But a couple hours later, after I have my coffee, my latte, my egg and sandwich or oatmeal, whichever one it ends up being, I alternate them. Then I feel better. Like, I feel physically like you've got the endorphins and all this stuff. Maybe I'll live longer. Got to stay healthy and strong for my family. And so, but it's not fun doing it. Okay, so that's what they mean by that. And then finally, self and personal identity and kind of a sense of spirituality. So here's the element of religion. I'll kind of end with this, that although I'm an atheist, there's something, the religious spiritual impulse that taps into something people need, which is something that takes you out of your ego, out of yourself. And it's a prayer, meditation, long solo walks on the beach, manning soup kitchens, helping the poor, volunteering for nonprofits. It's just something that takes you out of yourself, that makes you feel like you're doing something for not just your family, your kin and kind, but your community, your society, something that, that takes you out of yourself. Seems to make people feel like they're leading a more meaningful, purposeful life. So I end with the last paragraph of the book. Facing death and life with courage, awareness, and honesty can bring out the best in us and focus our minds on what matters most: gratitude and love. Gratitude for a chance at life, given the biological reality that those 100 billion people who lived before us were, in fact, only a tiny fraction of the many trillions of people who could have been born but were not. The chance encounter of sperm and egg that led to each of us could just as well as produce someone else, and you would never know it, because there would be no you to know. Once born, we are each unique, a concatenation of genes and brains with thoughts, feelings, memories, histories, and points of view that can never be duplicated, here or in the hereafter. Our sentience, yours, mine, and everyone's, is ours alone and like no other anywhere in the cosmos. We are given this one chance to live, some 80 trips around the sun, a brief but glorious moment in the cosmic drama unfolding on this provisional proscenium. Given all we know about the universe and the laws of nature, that is the most any of us can reasonably hope for. Fortunately, it is enough. It is the soul of life. It is heaven on earth. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shermer. And now that you're comfortably seated, you can probably field a few questions, and we have a few more coming in. Yeah, actually, we gathered some questions from the internet. We actually asked people to visit our website on Facebook, Santa Barbara City College Colloquium on Facebook, and you're certainly invited to do that as well. Also, I interviewed Dr. Shermer on my radio program a couple of weeks ago. We run it twice, actually, and his full interview is on there as well. I also forgot to mention that Heavens on Earth and other books of Michael Shermer are on sale, courtesy of Chaucer's Books. Dee Clark is the manager for events, and she has very kindly brought some of Dr. Shermer's books, and they're on sale. And of course, Dr. Shermer will sign them for you. I think a few of you have already done that, so very, very good. I have, I'm going to alternate between the internet questions for you, Michael, and the questions that were just picked up here in the room. So let me start with the internet questions. Given the state of the world today, do you still share the optimistic view that you expressed in your article in Skeptic magazine, also echoed by Steven Pinker? Or do you feel that the experiment of greater and greater inclusion, wait for it, has run its course?
Yeah, no, I'm still an optimist, and Steve Pinkerton is a friend of mine, and we share that optimism. Look, I mean, progress in social, moral progress, and so on is not a sort of monotonic, steady, linear curve that inevitably climbs. It's herky-jerky. It's like the global warming curve. It's up and down, up and down, up and down, but the overall sawtooth blade is up. And, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, so on. These areas are getting better, these areas are getting, so it just depends. Trade war, bad idea, right, Peter? No economist endorses a trade war, it's a bad idea. And some of the other things that current administration is doing, I think are at least provisionally regressive in terms of moral progress. But I doubt that it's going to reverse the trends of the last, say, century or two. The abolition of slavery, the abolition of the death penalty and torture and so on, all these things that have taken place in the Western world, these are not going to be brought back. Like women can't vote anymore. This is not going to happen. I mean, worst case scenario, even North Korea, looks like maybe Kim Jong-un just wants nukes for deterrence. Because if you took, so here's one of the things you have to do as a scientist is take the perspective of the other person rather than moralize about it. If you want to understand why people act morally or immorally, you got to take their point of view. So from the Kim family point of view, if you look at how America treats countries that have nukes versus those that don't, you want nukes because we don't mess with countries that have nukes. Okay, I can kind of see that's what he's thinking. I mean, those kinds of things I think are still in place, and deterrence still works. Moral progress is still happening. Saudi Arabia just this last year voted to allow women to drive. They got the vote in 2015. In 2017, they have the right to drive now. I mean, it sounds horribly regressive, but that's the kind of progress.
Well, Ken, I'm getting some cards now from the audience that here in the theater, and one of them just was handed to me. It was quite interesting. Do you ever feel lonely as a skeptic? Without, because many people believe in God as a universal power, which enables them to live their life.
I understand the question. If I lived in the Bible Belt, maybe I can see how that could happen. I live in Southern California, and I lived in LA. I mean, this is the most liberal places on the planet, except for maybe San Francisco. And there's plenty of people that don't believe in God. But in fact, the largest growing religious cohort in America are the nuns, actually the entire Western world. The people that tick the box for no religious affiliation. Now, they're not necessarily atheist agnostics, maybe they're followers of Deepak Chopra or something like that. Some kind of Western Buddhist spiritualism, there's a force in this, the force be with you kind of stuff. But at least they're not religious. And that's a quarter of all Americans, a third of all millennials. And that will continue on. It'll be, half of, I forget what the generation after millennial, the iGen, I think, is the people born after 2000. They'll be about 50% non-religious. So we are a rapidly growing minority. So no, I don't feel lonely that way.
Okay. This is another question from the internet website. If we are now in a post-truth world, and I think this question arises out of a recent article that you published in Skeptic magazine.
Yeah.
If we now live in a post-truth world, as you recently wrote, does that not logically entail, this obviously is written by a philosopher, does not logically entail that there was a time which was in fact a truth world?
Yeah.
And if so, what truth world was there then that we are now beyond?
Yeah, we don't live in a post-truth world, not at all. That's, it's a catchy meme that's taken off last year. That was the word of the year for 2017, was post-truth. The year before that was, post-truth 2 years ago. Last year was alternative facts, because obviously the Trump, Kellyanne Conway quoted that meme. Anyway, so, but no, that's not the world we live in. In fact, the fact that we can even ask the question and argue one way or the other means we're still using reason as a tool for understanding what is true. And I'm encouraged by, say, the rise of fact-checking sites. Snopes has been around for a long time. Skeptic, we do this. But PolitiFact, for example, has become the most go-to site for politician speeches that they fact-check in real time. And then they give it a rating. True, maybe not, maybe not true, false, and pants on fire, which I like the last one. The current administration seems to get a lot of those. In real time, they're fact-checking, and these have become very popular sites. The subscriptions to the New York Times have skyrocketed. Every time Trump calls in fake news, their subscriptions go up. So somebody is interested, clearly, in the truth, and so on. So I'm not discouraged by that at all.
It's a big business. I think I know who actually asked this question, a friend of mine. Have you recently come to a new understanding that consciousness is primary? Why is Sam Harris's view of pure consciousness different than Deepak's view?
No, I don't take that view. I have a chapter in my book on Deepak Chopra. He and I have become friends, even though we have differing worldviews. His is more of a Buddhist, and that worldview is, again, there's two ways to think about it. I call this the weak consciousness principle as opposed to the strong consciousness principle. So the weak consciousness principle is that everything in the universe is in your head. Your conscious awareness of it makes it real. And if you're not conscious of it, it's not real. For you, that's true. So like Deepak says, the entire Milky Way galaxy is right in there. How can that be? Because it's just a concept. That's true. I mean, we have to use words, we have to use language and math to describe things that are out there. But I don't go so far as to say that if I'm not conscious of it, it's not out there. It's out there whether I'm here or not. But for me, it's only real if I'm alive and consciously aware of it. I'm not actually sure what Sam's position is on this, and I think he's going to have Deepak on his podcast, and they can parse this out. Sam is definitely into meditation like Deepak is, and Sam argues that to truly understand consciousness, by which we mean, in Thomas Nagel's famous thought experiment, what's it like to be a bat? So what's it like to be an X is the question about consciousness. So something is conscious if it sort of knows what it's like to be itself. Something like that. And I think he and Deepak would agree on that. Now, for me, to find out what it would be like to be, say, a bat or a dolphin, I don't know, just take a dolphin. So, if I strap on some flippers and I get some internal breathing apparatus that, allows me to hold my breath longer, and I come up for air, and I have like a sonar thing up on my forehead here, and I'm pinging out sounds, and they're bouncing off, and from that I can form a picture of, say, a shark. I understand that whatever the dolphin sees as a shark probably looks nothing like what's forming on the back of my visual cortex, in the back of my head here, of sharkness. I'm sure the dolphin's image of a shark is quite different from mine. But there really are sharks out there that have a flipper on one end and a bunch of sharp things on the other end, and it wants to send you through it to the other end. It wants to eat you. And that's true whether you're a dolphin or a human. Now, at some point, if I strapped on all the neurological networks that run all the sonar and flippers and so on, I would no longer be a human asking what's it like to be a dolphin. I'd just be a dolphin. And the dolphin's probably not wondering what's it like to be a human. Or if it is, then it would have to do the reverse that I just did, and it would no longer be a dolphin, it would be a human. So I don't think it's actually possible, experimentally, or to move beyond the thought experiment, to know what it's like to be. Now, Deepak would say, this is conscious. What it's like to be a bottle of water, looking out, and I can't even imagine what he means by that. But what he says is that consciousness is the ground of all being. I'm just using his words. I don't know what they mean. It's the ontological primitive. So by this, he doesn't mean like in science with reductionism, you keep boring down further and further into the atom, and at some point we're just in pure energy and strings, if that turns out to be true. That's not going to get you to consciousness. It's almost like panpsychism. Everything is conscious. The chairs, the railing, the lights, the sky, me, you, everything. Just degrees of complexity of consciousness, something like that. And at some point, I just think it becomes one of these like college dorm, late night with adult beverages conversations that are fun to have and lead nowhere. Deepak has this whole thing about live in the now. And I went to the Shrine Auditorium when he and Eckhart Tolle did a show. Eckhart Tolle is the famous author of the book, The Power of Now. And they make a very good point. I completely agree with this. There is no past. We only have our memories of stuff that happened. Just neurons, that's all it is, neural patterns of stuff that already happened. You can't change it. So sitting there stewing in your chair, I should have said this, I should have told my boss that, and great, 10 years ago I should have been, complete waste of time. You can't do anything about it. And the future hasn't happened yet. You only have the now. Okay, I agree. But as I tell Deepak, my mortgage is due next month. Can I just blow that off and just tell the mortgage company, hey, dudes, I'm living in the now. They're going to go, yeah, well, we're taking your house next week. Okay. So at some point, it's sort of interesting to think about, and it's a good way maybe to reduce, all that thought flooding of negative energy you have from bad things that happen or whatever. But I don't see where it goes from there.
It's very impressive. You got all the way you brought us from Descartes all the way through Teilhard de Chardin with complexity consciousness. I'm very impressed about that. This is an interesting question. Are you skeptical about your own skepticism?
Yeah, I've never heard that one.
Now, on my radio show, I dubbed you as an equal opportunity skeptic, so you got to live up to that.
That's right. Yeah, so we have to think of skepticism as not a thing, it's just a tool like reason or science. It's just a way of approaching claims. In fact, really, skepticism is just the scientific way of approaching claims. That is, don't believe it until there's evidence for it. In science, this is called the null hypothesis. That is, your hypothesis, we're going to assume, is not true until you prove otherwise. So you say there's a Bigfoot, I say that's nice, show me the body, and I'll believe. If not, well, okay, I'm skeptical. I was just quoted in the New York Post yesterday. There's a California woman who's suing the state of California to put Bigfoot on the protected species list. And they said, no, we're not doing that because there's no such thing. And she said, well, I got this grainy video, and you can clearly see here if you squint and use your imagination, and don't think it's a bear, because that's probably what it was. It's real. No, okay, sorry. In science, that's not evidence. Okay. So same thing with the ufologists. ET is out there. Okay, probably. It's a big cosmos, lots of planets. Probably 1 trillion planets in our galaxy alone. There's probably 100 billion Earth-sized planets in the Goldilocks zone. Okay, they're probably out there. But they probably haven't come here. But if you show me, take me to Area 51 and show me the flying saucer, and that it's clearly not terrestrial, I'll believe. You say, well, I have a cure for AIDS or cancer, whatever. Okay, before the FDA is going to give you approval, to sell your drug on the market, you have to provide evidence for it. Otherwise, no. And that's just how all life should work. Mm-hmm. That's all it means to be a skeptic.
All right. Obviously, you make reference to David Hume quite often in your works, all of them actually. Here's a question that came in on the internet. If we cannot derive an ought from an is, as David Hume observes and urges us, then how can you advocate a scientific basis for ethics and morality, since that would not even pass your very own verification or falsification test?
Yeah. So that's the subject of my previous book, The Moral Art.
That's where it came from, right?
Yeah. And, okay, so first of all, it's a little bit of a non sequitur, but really more of a red herring, I think. If you mean by, say, for example, this is the naturalistic fallacy, war is natural and organisms are always in conflict with each other, therefore war is good, conflict is good. Yeah, okay, I would agree. We should not make that. That's a fallacy, the naturalistic fallacy. But more broadly, I think what Hume meant, but regardless of what he meant, it doesn't matter. The concept is that the way something is will help us determine what we ought to do about it. So if we say, these are the conditions that lead to war, whatever they are, that leads to violence, say human violence of any kind, we have a pretty good understanding now of why people commit crimes and homicides, for example. About 90% of homicides are moralistic in nature. They're mostly not instrumental. People don't kill each other to get their stuff. Like when a burglar burgles your house, he's hoping you're not home. And if you're home and unfortunately you don't have a gun or you do have a gun, this could go either way, then there's more likely to be conflict. So we know why people do and why they moralize about it. Jealousy, they feel slighted, insulted, stolen from, and so on. So we know how to attenuate those conditions in a society. We're getting better at that. So knowing that tells us what we ought to do if that's our goal. But then your correspondent there would say something like, yeah, but why ought we do something that leads to people to be less victims of violence? Because people don't want to die. I mean, again, the second law of thermodynamics is the first law of life. Pushing back against entropy. Nature wants to kill us, but we don't want to die. Why? Because that's what natural selection programmed us to do, to get your genes to the next generation. You got to be alive. So you have to struggle for life. And health is better than illness. Wealth is better than poverty. And not being physically attacked is better than being physically attacked. That's why we ought to do those things. So that's a 400-page book in 2 minutes. but I recommend the book.
Yes, I read the book. It's quite recommendable, actually. So, Dr. Shermer, this is an audience question here. So, Dr. Shermer, science is the new secular religion?
Yeah, sometimes that does come up a lot. I'm not quite sure why, because but by religion we mean something rather specific, almost always having to do with a supernatural entity or being or agent or something like that, and a set of rituals and so on. You can kind of loosely say scientists act like they're in a cult or something like that, or religion, but it's too broad a meaning of religion. I mean, the whole point of science is to not commit to ideas unless there is evidence, whereas in most religions, the whole meaning of the word faith is to accept it regardless of the evidence. This is what I believe, regardless of whether there's evidence for it or not. And science is the very opposite of that. And now, scientists may act dogmatic because they're human, but it's really not religion, it's more political. It's more like a political tribe. That is, our brains are more designed to act like lawyers than scientists, to defend your client to the best of your abilities. Client in the metaphor is your theory. Yes, it's true, scientists committed, particularly financially, to a particular theory, have a difficult time giving it up, but that doesn't mean that the other scientists they're in competition with will have any problem at all debunking it. They would be glad to debunk you. So young scientists can gain career advancement by debunking the crazy ideas of some other scientists, and that competitive nature makes it completely different from religion.
This is again from the audience. Why is it so important for you to speak against ideas of the afterlife? I think they mean religious afterlife.
Well, it's not important or unimportant in a general sense. I'm just curious. First, why do people believe in it? Second, is it really there? Is there something there? Because inquiring minds want to know. Like we were curious about the other big questions: free will and determinism and God's existence and meaning and purpose of life. These are the things that any sentient being that's paying attention would care about. So I'm just curious about it. Again, I'm not against it, depending on what it is. I don't want to go to celestial North Korea for sure. But if it was something that might be fun, but nothing's fun for eternity, so what does that even mean? So it's just kind of a way of exploring a big idea. I'm not against it. I'm not against God, even though I'm an atheist. It doesn't. And atheism isn't even a thing to be. It's not a worldview. It's just I don't believe in God. Full stop. Well, what do you believe in? Well, I believe in the Big Bang Theory and evolution and civil rights and liberties and equal treatment, love, gratitude. I believe in a lot of things, but that's not atheism. That's whatever you want to call it. I call it Enlightenment humanism or secular humanism or whatever.
All right. Last question, because we're running a little over. If science and technology have improved us politically, morally, as you say, and we're better humans, we're more free, we're more intelligent, then why are so many people so miserable?
They're not.
And suicidal, it says, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're not. Again, you got to follow the trend lines, not the headlines. Our senses are geared to paying attention to bad news and things that are immediately in our awareness. So this is what Amos Tversky and Kahneman call the availability heuristic. You ask people, what are you worried about? They'll tell you whatever was on the news last night. I'm worried about bridges falling on me, and terrorist attacks, and shark attacks, and killer bees. Whatever was on the news. These things are not even remotely on the list. They're not even the top 100 of things that could kill you. So we have this what's called a negativity bias. That is, for example, losses hurt twice as much as gains feel good. And so we're geared to pay attention to those things, because those are the kinds of things that could take us out of the gene pool before reproduction. So evolution designed us to pay attention to negative things. But if you look at the trend lines, for example, levels of happiness across the Western world over the last half century or so are on the upward trend in almost every country in the Western world, and even across states and so on. Still, rates of suicide, have rates of depression, these sorts of things are all trending downward. The fact that they're not zero or never will be zero, means that that'll always be an available network of things we notice and think. And also, intellectuals are really into this kind of postmodern, the theater is dead, and poetry is dead. People are living these soulless, meaningless lives. Speak for yourself. If you're leading a meaningless life in the world of, the internet, you're not doing it right. There's no reason to be that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, because there actually was a question about the contributions that art and literature have made to us in the world, and you don't discount those things.
Oh my God, no! I mean, here, you can just tap up and watch almost any film now available that's ever been made. Every piece of classical music, all the way back, as far as it's right there. No one's had that opportunity. We are now. This is the best year ever in the history of our species. And next year, we'll replace it as the best year ever. Unless, of course, something catastrophic happens.
Hey Siri, play Depeche Mode. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank you, Dr. Sherman. Thank you,
so much.
Professor Naylor. Thank you for being with us tonight. Yeah, I just want to remind you that there are books on sale if you wish. And thank you for the gift.
Oh, please.
The free gift.
Yes.
Don't forget your free copy of Skeptic magazine. Thanks very much.
Thank you again.
We are adjourned.